glad that you were able to find this video up on our YouTube channel. This video is specifically for our juniors knitting club, and in this video I am going to be showing a few different things that we are going to be doing and repeating in our knitting club. And this video is made specifically so that you can work on your project at home, and if you find yourself forgetting something, forgetting how to do a certain stitch, then you are going to want to refer back to this video so that you can continue working on your project at home. And if you are not from Knitting Club, feel free to continue to watch the video if you want to learn how to knit yourself, but this video is going to be especially helpful for those of you in our knitting club at Chilliwack Community Services. So I'm going to show you 3 different things in this video. I'm going to show you the cast on method that we're going to be using. I'm also going to show you the knit stitch and the purl stitch. So those are 3 different things that we are going to be doing and practicing a lot in our knitting club. And this little video is going to really help you out when you are working on your projects at home. So let's get started. Okay, so I am going to first show you the cast on method that we are going to be using in Knitting Club. So again, I don't think that you should need to worry about being able to do this at home. I will make sure that everybody has their stitches cast on before they leave the first session. That is my goal. But if you're knitting at home and something goes horribly wrong and you feel like you need to start over, then you're going to want to know how to cast on. So I'm going to go through this kind of quickly so that you know how to cast on if you need to. But again, you shouldn't have to worry about it. Okay, so I'm going to show you what's called the long tail cast on method. The only thing that makes this a long tail cast on method is that we use this little tail here as part of our cast on. So when we cast on stitches, this is where our stitches are going to come from. And that's the only thing that makes it a long tail cast on method. I find that it's just the easiest way to cast on stitches. This is exactly how I do mine. Okay, so the first thing we need to do before we start casting on stitches onto our needles, we need to make a little loop that is going to attach to our knitting needles so that we can start casting on. So I'm going to press these 2 fingers together, just like that. Now, holding my yarn with my thumb here, I am going to take my yarn and wrap it once around my fingers. So I've just kind of wrapped it around my fingers like that. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to create almost like an X on the top of my fingers here. So I'm just going to wrap around and I'm going to kind of create like an X like that. Okay, so I kind of have this little X here on top of my fingers. So now trying my best to hold my yarn here like this with my other fingers. I'm going to insert my pointer finger on my other hand, and I'm just going to go through underneath the first little piece of yarn. So the yarn that's closest to my fingertips, I'm going to insert my finger under that, just like that. Using the same finger, I'm going to go underneath here like that and just gently let go and pull. So that created a little loop here on my yarn. I'm going to show you one more time, a little bit faster. So holding my yarn best I can, wrap once, wrap again, creating an X on the top, go through the first piece of my yarn, under, let go, and pull. A little loop was just created, okay? So now I'm going to insert my knitting needle into that loop, and I'm just going to pull gently on the sides. Okay, so now what you want to make sure is that your tail is connected to the yarn that's on the other side of the loop that's kind of farther away from you. Like, you should be able to visually see what I'm talking about here, just how my yarn is. So what I don't want is this. Then my tail is over here. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, but I want my yarn to kind of come from the top here, over here. So that's how I'm gonna lay my yarn, like that. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you how to cast on. Casting on, I think for me personally, was the most difficult part of learning how to knit. But once I got past that, everything was kind of quite easy. So I'm hoping it's the same for you. So we're gonna be using our pointer finger and our thumb to cast on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna insert my fingers here and kind of pull apart my yarn here. So I'm kind of holding the yarn with the rest of my fingers here. Meanwhile, I am taking these two fingers and making them kind of stretch the yarn out like that. Okay, so this is what you should be doing. Now it's one kind of smooth motion now. I'm gonna turn my hand so that I'm almost giving a thumbs up. And my pointer finger is kind of pointing at my other hand. Okay, now stay with me. This is where I'm gonna take my knitting needle, go through the bottom loop, pick up the yarn, go through the back here, and through like that, and then pull gently, and you've just cast on a stitch. I'm gonna show you again. Okay, so I've got my yarn separated like this. I'm gonna turn my hand like that, making sure your needle stays in the same spot. I'm gonna go under this loop on the bottom, okay? And then around this loop here, I'm gonna go underneath it, and then I'm gonna kind of pull through like that. Now I know that looks very confusing, so I'm gonna keep going here. Okay, and then through. Again, you shouldn't need to worry too much about this. I will be making sure that everyone has stitches cast on their needles before they leave the first session. But in case something goes horribly wrong and you need to learn how to cast on, here you go. Okay, and through. So I'm just gonna go a few more times. Once you get the motion, you should be able to pick it up relatively quickly. Okay, same thing. Two more. All right. So now you can see here, if I pull my yarn apart on the top, I have cast on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I've just cast on 13 stitches. I'll tell you how many stitches you need to cast on for your scarf, but this is just to show you how to cast on. Okay, so hopefully that was okay for you. In the next part here, I am going to show you the knit and purl stitch. Now that you know how to cast on, I'm going to show you the knit and purl stitch. I'm going to show you these one at a time so you can really get the hang of them. And then for your scarf, you are going to actually put them together, which I will show you in the next video. Okay, so I've cast on my stitches here. I have a little tail at the end here. Now, normally I would just cut that off so that it's a little bit shorter, but it's not too long, so I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, so with my, if you are right-handed, you are gonna have your one knitting needle in your right hand. In your left hand. And then you're gonna have the needle that you're actually knitting with in your left hand. If you're left-handed, it will be vice versa probably. So I'm gonna first show you the knit stitch. The knit stitch, I would say it's a bit easier than the purl stitch. Just what I have found in the past, I find it a little bit easier. People can usually get the hang of it quite quickly. So the knit stitch. Now I have my knitting needle with my yarn in my left hand, my needle that I'm actually going to be knitting with in my right hand. Okay, knit stitch. I am going to take this first loop here. I'm going to insert my knitting needle here in right here and through to the back, creating what looks like an X. So see, I've just put my needle in here through the back. Okay. Now with my yarn, I'm gonna grab my yarn. So you're gonna have to balance here. You're gonna have to hold your knitting needles with your one hand. With my yarn, I'm gonna wrap it around counterclockwise around the back needle, the one that's in the back. So counterclockwise is this way. We're gonna wrap it around, just around the back needle here, like that. Okay, now what we're gonna do is you're gonna take your back needle, pull through this little loop, okay, and then pull it off. Now I'm gonna just pull my yarn to tighten it a little bit. Okay, and you've just knit your first loop. So I'm going to show you again. So in between here, I'm going to go through the back of the loop, take my yarn counterclockwise around the back needle. I'm going to pull it through, creating a loop on here, and then pull it off. And that's my second stitch. So I'm going to keep going here through the back, wrap around, and through. Now I'm going to show you this in person, so don't panic if you're watching this and you're panicking, thinking that you're not sure how to do it. I'll show you again in person if you're just not getting the hang of it. I'll show you again in person next time I see you. Okay, so I've just done 4 stitches. So through into the back, creating an X, counterclockwise around the back of the needle, and then you're gonna pull this your needle in your right hand through and pull that off. Okay. Trust me, it's much easier when you see this done in person, so don't panic. This video is just to refresh your memory if you're working on this at home and you need help. Okay, so I'm gonna just keep going here. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this. Through the back, counterclockwise, creating a little loop here, pulling off. Okay. Again, this is the knit stitch. Through the back, pull around. And I just like making sure that my yarn, my ball of yarn, is actually in front of me here. Okay. So I just have 3 more counterclockwise, pull through, counterclockwise, pull through, counterclockwise, pull through. Okay, so that is the knit stitch. So once you continue to knit, you'll actually be able to see what it looks like. And what it looks like is actually like little ups, like little V's, like the letter V. That's what it will end up looking like at the end of it. Now what I'm gonna do, now that I have all my yarn, it's basically like you have just taken your yarn and transferred it all onto your opposite needle. That's exactly what you want. So now I'm just going to return this needle to this hand so that with my yarn, my needle's in my left hand, and then the needle that I'm knitting with is in my right hand. Okay? So now I'm going to show you the purl stitch, and then we are going to put the two stitches together. Next up is the purl stitch. Now the main difference between the purl stitch and the knit stitch is that for the purl stitch, we are going to be working from the front. So that means our yarn is going to be in front of us and our needles are going to go into the front of the loops. So normally with a knit stitch, I would go in between here and in through the back. Well, this time with a purl stitch, I'm gonna go in through the front. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in the front of the loop here and make an X like that. Now with the yarn in front of me, see how it's not behind me, it's in front of me. With the yarn in front of me, I'm gonna wrap my yarn around that needle counterclockwise the same way, and then we're gonna slip that stitch off, and I'm just gonna tighten here. So I'll show you that again. So in through the front of the loop, create that little X, take your yarn counterclockwise around and pull off. Again, needle through the front, create that X, holding tight here, yarn, wrap around counterclockwise and off. Now I'm just gonna keep doing this. I think once you start doing this, you will catch on quickly. The purl stitch can be more tricky for some people. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep going. So yarn through the front of the loop, wrap the yarn around the front needle and back around. So notice that I'm wrapping the yarn around the front needle. Normally with the knit stitch, we would be wrapping it around the back needle. So like I said, everything is from the front now with the purl stitch. Okay. And this, I'm just gonna stop here and show you. This is what the purl stitch looks like. It just looks like almost like these little beads have formed. That's exactly what the purl stitch looks like. So that's kind of a visual representation for you. I'm just going to finish this row. So again, I'm going to try and get nice and close here. Through the front, okay, wrap the yarn around the front needle only, and through and pull off. Every single time we do this, we're essentially transferring the loop from our needle in our left hand to the needle in our right hand. Oops. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop there because I think I've shown you quite a bit. So that is what our purl stitch looks like here. If I can get my camera to focus on it, there we go. So that is the knit and purl stitch. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to show you the stitches combined, and I'm gonna show you the sequence that you'll be doing on your scarves that we're gonna make. Now we are going to combine our two stitches and form a sequence that we will be using for our scarves. So the sequence that I'm going to be using is knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl. And trust me, you will start to remember that as soon as you start knitting, because you will visibly be able to see the difference between a knit and a purl stitch. So you almost don't even need to be worrying about forgetting which stitch you need to do next, because as you get to the second or third row, you should be able to see exactly what stitch you need to do. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my 2 knit stitches. So I'm going to do 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches. So I'm going to go in through the back, my knit stitch, wrap my yarn around back and through. So that's 1 knit stitch, and there's my 2nd knit stitch. Now, really important, when you're switching from your knit stitch to your purl stitch, counterclockwise, you need to bring your yarn through to the front, okay? Do that first, no matter what. Now I'm going to do my purl stitch. So I'm going to go into the front and wrap my yarn around. So there's 1 purl stitch and my 2nd purl stitch. Okay. So now I'm going back to my knit stitch. So before I do anything, I'm going to take this yarn and wrap it around the back. Really, really important. So there's a knit stitch and there's a knit stitch. Now I'm going to do my purl stitch. Now a beginner mistake is taking the yarn and putting it forward just like that. If you do that, you're actually going to end up with twists in your yarn, and you don't want to do that. So make sure you wrap it around to the front, almost as if like in between your needles there. So now I'm going to do my purl stitch. Now I'm going to do my knit stitch. So my yarn's going to go in back, and I'm just going to keep going. Yarn in front for my purl stitch. Yarn in back for my knit stitch. Trust me, this will make much more sense as we are in person. This video, again, is just for if you need any kind of refreshers as you're working on your scarf at home. And this is the same sequence that we'll be doing for our entire scarves. It's going to be knit, knit, purl, purl. Knit, knit, purl, purl. And you can always write it down too. All right, I'm finishing up with my last knit stitch, with my last stitch, which is a knit. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue this pattern. I'm just going to, so switch hands here. I'm just going to continue this pattern, this exact sequence, and then I will show you what this looks like after a few rows. So just continue going, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl. Okay, I just want to show you here, I've actually only done about 3 rows, and you can already see the pattern beginning to form, and that's why I really wanted to stop and show you here. So as you can see, we have kind of a pattern going on here. And as you can see, we have 2 rows that look like little upside down V's, and then we have our little purls. And that's how we know our knit from our purl. So if you can memorize what the knit stitch and the purl stitch look like, you can visually be able to tell what stitch you need to make next. For example, I know that it was knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, just based on what I can see here. So that's something that I really want to point out to you right away, because now I don't even really need to remember what I need to do next, because I can see what I need to do next. I can see that I need to knit the first 2 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Knit, knit. I can visually tell that I need to purl the next 2 stitches. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front and I'm going to purl the next 2 stitches. And then we're just going to keep going. And then I can see here that I need to knit the next 2 stitches. So I'm going to bring my yarn in the back. And we're going to continue to do this until we finish our scarf. Now, it is going to be a really long process, but trust me, the end result is going to be worth it. And this is the sequence that we are going to be doing for our entire scarf. Knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl. And by the 3rd row, you should be able to visually see here your pattern, your sequence. Now, as long as you can remember to switch that yarn from front to back every single time before you're switching from your knit to purl stitch, I think you're going to be just fine. And yeah, so that is how we are going to be making our scarf in Knitting Club. So I really hope that this video was helpful for you. Please refer back to it at any time if you need to. And I look forward to seeing you all in Knitting Club. Now, if you're still watching the video, I actually just wanted to show you something. So what I have in front of me here is a scarf that I have actually already made myself. And it uses the exact same sequence that we are going to be using in our Knitting Club. So if I gently pull this apart, you'll see what my pattern looks like. And it's the same thing. It's knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl. So I have 2 rows of knit, 2 rows of purl, 2 rows of knit, 2 rows of purl. So that's what your scarf will end up looking like at the end. It will kind of be this beautiful ribbed pattern that we have here when we pull it apart. And as you can see, it's the same on both sides, which is what I really like about this sequence that we're going to be doing. Not only is it really visually really nice, but it's also very easy to do. So yeah, I really look forward to seeing all of our creations by the end of Knitting Club, and I hope you are just as excited as I am.